bring in legal expert Bennett Gershman, a distinguished professor of law at Pace University in New York. Professor, thank you so much for coming on Morning Rush. We appreciate you taking the time out. Let's first focus on Chief Justice Roberts blocking the Trump tax records from being released, and also the news that Justice Thomas initially delaying Senator Graham's testimony. Of course, we have new developments in that case. Is it normal to see rulings like these from just a single justice?
Well, the justices by themselves can impose a restraint and let the full court decide the full issue. I think the larger question is the perception of the Supreme Court by the public. And as you say, the Supreme Court has reached a new low in terms of, confidence in the court. We've seen certain extraordinary events over the last several months, really. We've seen the Supreme Court opinion leak to the public and to the media. We've seen a justice's wife involved, we may think, in the insurrection itself. And we've seen the way Congress has, or the Senate has sabotaged appointments to the Supreme Court. I'm thinking of Merrick Garland. They said they wouldn't appoint him because it's too long. It would before the election. But then Amy Coney Barrett gets appointed weeks before the election. So the way the Supreme Court has acted over the last several years, it suggests partisanship, and I think that's pretty clear. Most people, if you ask them, how will the Supreme Court rule on the affirmative action case that was argued this past Monday, people would say to a certainty how the court will rule. And their decisions have reeked with politics. The gun decision last June, written by Justice Thomas for a 6-member majority, that's probably the most intellectually dishonest opinion that the Supreme Court has ever written. And the Dobbs decision was a shambles in terms of its reasoning and argument. So I think people see the Supreme Court as mirroring politics in America. The justices appointed by Republicans, and particularly the 3 justices appointed by Donald Trump, where they're going to vote. And so the public sees the Supreme Court being as partisan as it clearly is, and stopping the tax return findings you just mentioned. Politicians will look to the court to seek refuge, to seek a sanctuary, and they know that the court will help them, or at least that's the perception. So this is a terrible time in our constitutional history anyway, and as you say, the court confidence in the court has reached the lowest point, in memory, in generations. So the image of the court has taken a terrible, terrible blow, and how to repair it is a big question.
Let me just zero in for a second on the Clarence Thomas issue in terms of his initial ruling that helped Lindsey Graham to not testify here in Georgia in the election interference case happening here. There was one activist, Max Berger, who tweeted on Monday, "Hard to overstate how anti-democratic and delegitimizing this move is. The husband of a key insurrectionist blocks the testimony of a key witness in an election interference probe. Democrats should launch impeachment proceedings against Clarence Thomas. He is not fit to serve." Again, that's the opinion of activist Max Berger after Justice Thomas acted in this way. My question is, on just an ethics perspective, if your wife is involved in the insurrection, so much so that she testified voluntarily in front of the committee, how can a justice fairly rule on that? And why, in the bigger picture, is there no code of ethics for the highest court in the land that ultimately judges every cultural war we fight in this country?
Well, look, the optics of that are terrible. Clearly, a justice can, by him or herself, delay a ruling. Look, if an inmate is facing capital punishment and goes to a judge in the Supreme Court and asks the judge to stop the execution, the judge may very well do that, awaiting a full decision by the court. But for Clarence Thomas to step in like this, and Thomas has dissented in other cases involving Trump, involving the insurrection, so it looks terrible. And Thomas should have seen that. The court should have seen that. Allowing that to happen, whether it's protocol or not, is a terrible.
That's the question. Should there be protocol? Should there have a mechanism in place that forced him or any justice with a conflict to recuse him or herself? You can't regain trust in the court if people are ruling on cases in which they have a personal interest, regardless of the politics or the individual person.
Correct. The Supreme Court really is the only court that doesn't have its own code of ethics. Now, Congress has just, at least the House, has is considering a bill called the Supreme Court Justice Ethics Act to promulgate certain ethical rules for the court, and it's still in the House of Representatives. And certainly it would enhance public trust if the Supreme Court did have a code of ethics, and also, by the way, a code of ethics that can be enforced. The problem is, if you have a lower court federal judge who's got ethics problems and it goes to the Supreme Court can review that, and they can find that this judge should disqualify himself or herself. But the problem is, in the Supreme Court, there's no reviewing body. There's no enforcement of any ethics. And by the way, even if this ethics code gets enacted, and there's an issue involving Supreme Court ethics, who's going to enforce that? The Supreme Court has to enforce it himself because they're the top court in the country. They review all matters coming to the court involving issues of bias and everything, really. So the question of Supreme Court justices behaving dishonestly, what you do about it, the really only thing you do about it is you impeach them. That is the ultimate remedy. But there really is no other remedy. And for justices to engage in unethical behavior, and they're the ones who have to rule on it, is a very, very difficult task. And so I'm not sure that an ethics code by itself can deal with it. I think our political process has to deal with it. We have to appoint better justices and maybe enact a statute that adds justices to the Supreme Court. Maybe that's one remedy. You can't do your term limits because the Constitution forbids that. So maybe making the court larger will be one way to make the court's appearance fairer and maybe actually fairer.
Yeah, that's one idea floated by the Democrats for sure. Professor, with Justice Thomas unlikely to recuse himself in those matters, is it the best remedy for this for Congress to get involved? You had mentioned the House working on some legislation right now. Is there any momentum that you're seeing behind that, getting through the House, through the Senate, and to the President's desk before the midterm elections, which could flip control back to the Republicans in the House?
Well, certainly I don't see this getting enacted anytime soon. It may be stalled in the House. Certainly if it goes to the Senate, you don't expect the Senate to support it. Now, look, there is an Ethics Act that applies to all federal judges in the federal code, 28 U.S.C. 455. It does require judges to recuse themselves when they have a conflict of interest. And in a situation where Thomas's wife is involved, it would seem that this clearly should require Thomas to recuse himself in any cases involving Trump or the election. But the fact of the matter is, if Thomas doesn't, there's no procedure to enforce Thomas's recusal. That's the problem. Now, the court may see itself as being so embarrassed by this that maybe they'll strong-arm Thomas to get out of the case. But other than that, there really is no remedy to enforce ethics on the Supreme Court. It's the Supreme Court justices' own sense of their ethics and integrity that would sort of induce the justice to recuse himself. But it should, short of that, it really is a problem that I don't see being solved. And I'm just not sure that an ethics code would solve it. As I say, there's already an ethics code that applies to all federal justices. But enforcing it is the problem, in my opinion. And I don't know right now that there's any easy way to do it, short of impeaching a justice who behaves dishonestly.
And let's be honest, it's a lifetime appointment, so they don't have to run for re-election or answer to voters. So once you have that black robe on, you're safe by and large. And last point, this isn't a question, but let's also keep in mind we know what's going to happen on Tuesday, and the possibility for litigation and lawsuits stemming from the midterms certainly seems high. And you have to imagine some of those cases will get to the Supreme Court, and how does that court react if we're seeing a wave of recounts and contested elections and charges of fraud or what have you? That we'll save for another day. But it's a fascinating time for that court as well. A lot on their plate and a lot of really serious, profound questions. Sir, thanks so much for giving us some time and some insight today. We certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.